The live stream will start momentarily. Alright, here we are. Now it is time for me to start reading. We are going to start from chapter 3. Chapters 3 through whatever I get to. Live streaming reading aloud. That is what I'm going to do right now. Toby's consciousness gradually returned to her body, though she retained the awareness that she could enter that state whenever she wished. She did not wish it now, and only wanted to come back to a normal viewing of the world. So she returned her spirit to her body and awoke gradually, like coming out of a dream, though she remembered everything with perfect clarity. She felt relaxed, calm, and ready to face the world. She did not feel any need to tell anyone, nor did she feel a driving urge to know more about what had happened. She knew that she was stronger and more wise, and that was it. So when she stood at the noose, condemned as a witch, underneath the town's oldest tree and with a stool under her feet, she understood what and why she had to die. She did not want to die. Her entire body felt electrified. Visions of the darkness to come flashed in front of her because now she knew what was on the other side. The feeling that only death can bring upon humans was overwhelming her. She knew that there was nothing left for her. It had started when she had talked to her parents first thing in the morning. By the time the sun was halfway across the sky, it was known throughout the town. The girl was a witch. Toby was a witch. She had made a pact with the devil to gain power, and had to be hung, or else the village would suffer a dire consequence. Toby did not see any possible consequence as a result of her transformation, but she did know why the villagers acted the way they did. It did not soothe her in the slightest to know the reason for her death, but it helped her accept it. Her parents stood in front of the noose, her father and mother looking like strangers that had just witnessed a murder. They held no sympathy for her. They had not even tried to oppose the will of the village elders. I misspelled the word there. They had simply handed her over and given her to the people, without once meeting her eyes or speaking to her after their first measures of surprise. Because they had been surprised, they had seen her in the morning and had not said anything for minutes as they tried to parse the change that had occurred to her. She was now a full-sized adult, bearing the same appearance as if she had grown up normally, but without any of the impurities that marred most humans. She had been made beautiful. Everything about her was perfectly proportioned. All of the imperfections in her body had been scrubbed away. She knew it was because of the power of the creature that had infected her. She did not resent it. She merely thought about it with the detached interest that dead people use. Someone's in the library. And so she stood underneath the tree with the eyes of everyone in the village on her person. They did not carry any malice, only fear. The most fearful eyes were those of her parents. She knew what they were thinking without even having to read their minds. They were afraid that they, too, would be punished for her transformation. They probably would. Though they might not be killed, they would definitely be ostracized and treated as pariahs for the rest of their lives. There was no changing that fact. The hangman, an older fellow whom Toby always called Uncle Tom, held his foot right next to the stool, ready to kick it over when the command was given. "Sorry we were late," came a voice, as Uncle Tom keeled over as if he'd been struck by lightning. A gentle hand began to untie the noose around Toby's neck, and she felt the presence of a person behind her, a woman who had a bright mind like a star that had come down from heaven, kind of like how Toby could see herself. A burning ball of plasma in a world where there existed only dull lanterns. She couldn't read into that person's mind, which startled her more than anything else that day. She was brought down as lightly as if she were a feather and placed squarely on the ground, facing the girl. She was about Toby's height, stunningly beautiful, with perfect proportions too good to be true, and a figure that was statuesque and like a carving out of the imagination of a master artisan. And Toby understood that this was how she was supposed to look. Like this, beautiful beyond comparison, so pretty that she had to be a witch. She knew what to do without anyone saying anything, and began to walk away from the villagers, who were gathered in a spectacle, their mouths gaping and open, watching with incredulous expressions on their faces. Toby's mother collapsed to the ground and began to sob. Her father wrapped his arms around her mother, refusing to look Toby in the eye. The girl who had saved her placed her arms on Toby's shoulder. "They are no longer your parents," she said. Her face showed empathy, and Toby knew that the same process had happened to her, too. She was familiar with the feeling. Toby knew it. Uncle Tom struggled to his feet about 10 meters away from where Toby stood. The girl who had saved Toby held out her hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "Witch," said Uncle Tom, as he began to lumber towards Toby and the girl. Toby knew what he had in his hands even before he showed it. She knew that what Uncle Tom was going to do. She started to stumble backwards, but her new body got in her way and caused her to fall to the ground on her tailbone, supporting herself with her hands. Uncle Tom sprinted the last few meters and raised a knife up over his head with a clear intent to kill. The knife simply glanced over Toby's body. Toby reacted before she could think and kicked at Uncle Tom with both feet. There was a moment of slow motion where Uncle Tom's body was completely distorted in ways that Toby never thought possible, and then a half-second later he was embedded a meter deep in the stone wall of a building on the other side of the village. He was dead. Toby knew it, and there was no doubt about that fact. His mind light had been extinguished even before he landed. The girl who had saved her winced. "That's going to leave a mark." She glanced down at Toby. "I'm sorry, but we have to go. There are people after us." "Monster." Toby heard that whisper, and for a second she wasn't sure who it had come from. Then she knew. It was her mother. Her mother was calling to her. "Monster. Witch. You killed him." Toby collapsed and began to sob. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know. I didn't mean to kill him." The girl who had saved her sighed, and then picked Toby up in one arm and slung her over her shoulders. "We're going now." She looked back at the stunned villagers, and then she reached out and placed a small flower on the ground next to where Toby had killed Uncle Tom. "For him. His soul will rest in peace now." She hesitated for a moment, and for a second Toby thought she could read the girl's mind. But the moment passed, and the girl sprinted away from the village at such an alarming rate that Toby was shocked out of her sobbing. They traveled so fast that Toby couldn't even get a proper view of the world around her. Everything was blurred. She had never even thought it was possible to move this quickly. The wind buffeted her hair, and the motion of the girl was gentle enough that she could feel every footstep. "I failed to introduce myself," said the girl, which Toby heard over the buffeting wind thanks to her newfound ears. "My name is Sarah. I'm a magical girl." Toby did not respond. She didn't know what to say, and if she had said something, she didn't trust herself to say it right. She was still shell-shocked from everything that had happened that day. "Hello." Toby did not respond. She didn't know what to say, and if she had said something, she didn't trust herself to say it right. Well, that was just someone in the library. I'm reading aloud in the library right now, so there's other people in the library. She was still shell-shocked from everything that had happened that day. Images of her mother, her father, and Uncle Tom's twisted body kept flashing past her eyes. She couldn't stand it and felt like she was about to explode with emotion, but she managed to keep it down. Sarah said nothing for another hour, until in a single second she leapt over 50 meters to the right, abruptly changing their direction. "We've been spotted!" Before Toby could figure out what was happening, a laser-fast projectile whizzed past, so fast that it left a trail of sound in its wake. Toby could track it with her new eyes. Before she knew what she was doing, she twisted her body out of the way, doing a triple somersault off of Sarah's body and landing on her feet 10 meters distant. 2 more projectiles flashed past, and Toby whipped her arms and her torso away just in time for them to miss her, leaving a thundering sound in their wake. And then before she could gain her balance, a monster was on her. A girl with raven black hair, black like the blackness of ink on a moonless night, and red eyes that were filled with hatred and clouded with images of death appeared in front of her with a sword raised to kill. This was no ordinary sword. Toby could see that. It would kill her if it touched her. Before a millisecond had passed, the girl's sword sliced through where Toby had been the millisecond before. Toby was now underneath the girl's legs, sliding, unsure of what she had done to achieve that position. She grabbed the girl by the legs and flipped the girl over her head, using the girl as leverage to twirl into the sky. The girl broke free in less than a tenth of a second and kicked Toby squarely in the chest, and Toby blasted several kilometers across the open plain in less time than she could blink. She stopped herself by cutting a meter-deep trough in the sod with her left hand. It was half a kilometer long when she had finished. The girl was 3 kilometers away, and Toby could see every feature of the girl's face clearly and sharply. In 2 seconds she was on her. The raven black hair streamed behind her like a coat-tail, and Toby barely managed to get out of the way before the sword split the air where she had been. The girl flipped over Toby's head, slicing her with her sword, and the ground parted like someone had just pulled the very fabric of the earth apart. And then Sarah was upon her, spinning and fighting with the speed of a lightning bolt and the ferocity of an elephant tiger. Toby's eyes could just barely follow the motion, even though they were so sharp that supersonic bullets traveled as fast as lazy flies to her. Then, after a tiny amount of time that was extended into a long moment, the two broke contact. The raven-haired girl had Sarah at the tip of her sword. The moment lasted for a minuscule instant before the raven-haired girl struck, but it was a moment of hesitation too long, because Toby was in and out of the fight like a flash, with Sarah on her back. Now it was Toby's turn to carry Sarah. They pulled away from the raven-haired girl as fast as Toby could move, but the raven-haired girl did not give chase. She simply stood her ground next to the crater where there had once been grass and watched them run away. When they were far enough that Toby was comfortable they weren't in danger, she spoke to Sarah. "Who was that?" "Our enemy," said Sarah. Toby knew better than to ask anything more. She understood what had happened had just been a brush with death closer than the one she had experienced just an hour before. The raven-haired girl was still watching them, Toby knew, but since they had gotten this far away, she doubted that the raven-haired girl would chase after them. "Access the network," said Sarah. She jumped off of Toby with a pirouette and landed gracefully on her feet. "Or you don't know how to do that yet, do you?" Toby said nothing. "Feel the energy coursing through your body," said Sarah. Toby delved into herself and found the rushing torrent of power that she had encountered the night before. "What do I do with it?" she said. "Access it." Toby tried to access it, but couldn't figure out how. It was simply too large. Sarah tapped her foot pensively on the sod. "All right. We're going to have to rewire your magic circuits, it looks like. Don't worry, pretty much everyone has to do that when they first start out." She looked back towards where the raven-haired girl had been. For the first time, Toby noticed Sarah's hair, long and blonde, and thought to herself that it was beautiful. So was the hair of the raven-haired girl. She wondered if her own hair was that beautiful now. It probably was. Sarah looked towards the north. "That way lies our destination." She put her body into a ready stance. 200 clicks. It'll take about half an hour at half speed. Are you ready?" Toby nodded, and the two of them took off across the landscape, through the open plains, and then into a forest where they danced around the trees, without losing any forward speed, even though there was no open space for running. Moving this way was the most natural feeling Toby had ever felt. She knew she was now very powerful. How powerful she didn't know, but she was ready to learn. Sarah put up her hands. "Wait!" They both stopped within a second, plowing troughs in the ground with their feet. Toby couldn't see what was going through the trees, but she could hear. Bandits. They were attacking the caravan. "It's our job to help at times like this," said Sarah. "That's what magical girls are all about. You'll learn sooner or later." Sarah and Toby crept up the main road through the underbrush without making a single noise, their footsteps as light as those of an experienced woodsman on his best day. They came up to an opening between the trees, and Toby caught sight of a group of armed men battling in the open. The caravan had guards. It looked like 6 of them, but there were over 20 bandits, and the guards were losing. Bad. Sarah held up her hand. "When I give the signal." There was a 2-second pause. Then Sarah whistled, and both of the magical girls swung out of the forest. "No killing," said Sarah, as they sprung through the trees. "Not now." Toby understood. She was just getting used to the power of her new body, and she knew that she could control it just enough to stun the bandits without killing them. Toby flashed through the fighting warriors without stopping, tapping each bandit she met with a single finger at their neck. Each one collapsed to the ground without a sound. When all 20 bandits were down, Toby stopped in front of the caravan guards. They looked at her with surprise that was natural, and by reading their minds, Toby could tell that they had absolutely no idea who she was. Then she caught sight of something behind her. A huge club flashed down towards her, faster than it should have been able to. It was an ogre, a massive one. The ogre grabbed an unconscious bandit by the feet and held him up in the air, and then swung him away without a second thought. Toby backed off, unsure of what to do. "Sarah," she said. Sarah was sitting beside the road, her hands on her chin. "It's my job to train you, as a matter of fact. This is a good start." The ogre roared, and the guards of the caravan shied away, and then they dropped their weapons and ran. The ogre charged forwards with its club raised. It swung once, mightily, and split the entire caravan in two, just as Toby dodged out of the way. "Hit it," said Sarah. The ogre grunted and aimed for Toby once more. Toby felt a flash of adrenaline, and then she leapt up and punched the ogre in the gut. The ogre, which was 3 times as tall as her and 100 times heavier, flipped backwards and plowed a 20-meter-long furrow in the ground. It was dead before it stopped moving. Sarah stood up and brushed her hands off on her pants. "That was your first lesson. You are strong now." She smiled and extended her hands to Toby. "Welcome to the Magical Girls. Sorry you had to fight with the Gothics right after your recruitment. And also bandits. You've had a tough day." Toby finally felt a lock come off her mind. She could think now, and speak. It was like before. She was in a clouded state of incredulous blindness. She hadn't been able to react properly. What's a magical girl?" she asked. Sarah laughed. "You should know by now." She reached out her hand. "Come, the commander is waiting for you." Chapter 4. Raven. Rain stood before a clockwork mansion, a house of gears and knobs in a city of brass and steel. Her hair was raven black, and her eyes were burning red with a feeling that wasn't quite hatred, as it was fury at the world around her. She was perfectly proportioned, beautiful even when compared to the gods above. She had no equal in terms of physicality, or at least so it seemed to the people who were watching her from the street, wondering who she was and what she was doing. She closed her eyes, placed her hand on her silvered sword, and took in a deep breath, centering herself. Then she walked through the door. In the central chamber, she knelt down in front of a semi-transparent screen through which she could see nothing but the shadow of a sitting figure. "You failed me," said the figure in a voice that was as smooth and graceful as it was feline and purring. It was a woman's voice, the voice of a woman who in all probability was even more beautiful than Rain. "I told you to retrieve them." "I am sorry," said Rain. "I do not want your paltry apologies. I want to see the new formation, the first one in 500 years. You should know the importance of such a missive." "She was taken before I could—" A flowing network of light spread out from the screen, cutting through the fabric with its ghostly form. The tendrils crackled with electric power, divine providence, the impetus of the gods. They wrapped around the edges of the room and then headed for the center, where Rain knelt. Rain tried to stand up, but the tendrils forced her down. She gave an audible gasp. Her body was sullenly locked in place. The tendrils grew around her neck, her chest, constricting her until she found it impossible to do more than wheeze for air. You know what happens to those who failed me," says the figure. Rain could not answer. She could only the tendrils as they pressed the life out of her. For if she did not fight them with all her might, they would squeeze her to death in less than a heartbeat. She would be no more than a bloody pulp if that were to happen, not even recognizable as a human. The figure behind the screen began to laugh orgasmically. "Ah, such power! You have such power, my pawn!" Rain gurgled on the fluids from her stomach, which were coming up her esophagus as the tendrils compressed her organs. The acid burned. Then the tendrils suddenly relaxed. Rain gulped for air as fast as she could, expecting them to start again. But they remained lax. The figure behind the screen seemed to be thinking about something. "No, it's no good to throw away my toys like this," she said. "I must use them until they break. It would be no good to break them myself." She seemed to be talking both to herself and to Rain. Then she laughed again orgasmically. "But she failed us. Yes, she did." Rain said nothing, though that to speak was her death. Then the tendrils retracted from the walls, returning to their place behind the screen. Rain relaxed just in the slightest, knowing that her days of life had been returned to her as if being cast aside like trash. The figure behind the screen spoke again. "Very well. I have decided you are to take a contingent of mechs and capture the new formation. Do not let the magical girls indoctrinate her. I want her for my collection." Rain bowed her head deeply. "Yes, your will shall be done." Then she stood up and backed slowly out of the room. When the doors had closed behind her, she collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. Sweat beaded on her brow, which she had before been suppressing. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and swallowed. Her innards still hurt from the pressing they had taken. Her mouth tasted like bile. She felt dizzy. Before she could properly recover, a man in a suit approached her. He was a normal man, without any special powers, except that his mind was walled off like a fortress. Rain could not even sense him coming, which is what put her off about him. She recovered herself as fast as she could, but she knew that she had been seen. The man said nothing. Rain understood this to mean that he had given her grace. She stood in her usual seductive posture and tilted her head. "Do you have something for me, Maxwell?" she said. Maxwell bowed before her. "Milady, the mechs are being readied for your foray." Rain nodded once and then followed Maxwell through the mansion until she came to a yard, separated from the rest of the city, underneath which was an elevator that took them to the depths of the earth, a kilometer below the surface. The doors opened onto a massive cavern filled with clockwork machinery, steam engines, huge gears turning ever so slowly as automated mechatrons operated the controls. Below, on a parade ground at the bottom of the cavern, an army was assembling. "I'm not sure what an army of mechs can do against an awakened one," said Rain, mostly to herself. "I can assure you of their quality," said Maxwell, as the two of them descended a pulley into the level of the parade ground. The operator of the pulley was a giant rat, a galich, that wore brass armor sculpted to make it look like a dragon. When they reached the bottom, more galich scurried about, commanding the mechs and preparing them for their mission. From above, Rain hadn't been able to fully appreciate their size or number, in part due to the instruction of the giant gears. But now that she was among them, she knew that they were a massive force. Over 1,000 mechs were gathered, each one 7 feet tall and weighing in at several tons. Steam billowed from every crevice in their suits, and their glass-red eyes stared out unblinking at the world. This was hers to command. She had an army at her fingertips, one that would obey her every word. She would get done what she needed to get done. Alright, so that's the end of chapter 4. I think I'm going to end the live stream here. Yeah, I'm going to end the live stream here. Should I end the live stream here? I don't know. You can comment, you can do various other things. You can, stream health. That's it. You can go now. Well, I mean, there's only one person watching. Anyways, I guess I'll have a conversation with, this is the conversational part of the, stream, part where I have a conversation with you. If you want to have a topic that you want me to speak on, then go ahead, because, enter in the comments. There's a live chat. There's a live chat. Whatever. If you don't want to chat, that's fine. So this channel is probably going to become a reading aloud channel, because there's pretty much nothing else that I can add to the community. I don't really have very many. I don't have acting skills. I don't have acting skills. All I have is the a mind that is sharper than most, but it's not as sharp as I'd like it to be. I mean, I really don't think that I'm as intelligent as some people out there. But I think I'll end the stream here, and I'll start another stream when I feel the urge to read chapter 5. I'll either read chapter 5 in a stream, or I'll read it in well, you get it, Alright, let's see. Yep. Talking to the camera is something that I still need to get used to doing. That is all, and I thank you for watching, and I will probably do more streaming later.